Dungeon Masters are the most responsible for the group having fun. If your DM is good, you're likely having fun. If the DM is utter dumpster trash coagulating with sewer fluids, you end up with something that goes a little like this. A burrito wrap of railroading, anime main character syndrome, and blatant cheating. That being said, this is the second part of a series of videos. I would recommend watching the first before watching this one, but honestly, it's not too important as the terrible events described herein are bad regardless of context. In short, the first video is the fuse. This is the dynamite. You're still getting all of the boom right here, right now. Roll post. Firstly, the Steel Fist coordinated much better because they were playing seriously. They had been promised major rewards at the end of the campaign if they won, and they wanted to collect. Our side was mostly made up of more casual players, a lot of whom were just starting out, so they were still low to mid level and absolutely not used to playing a high stakes campaign. Secondly, Sierra as DM had stacked encounters and outcomes to favor her side. Players who had to leave early, like me since I had to work in the morning, were penalized experience points, and parties that wasted too much time, as she would say, were also penalized experience points. Players who had to leave had to put their characters, quote, in limbo. The adventure continued, but their involvement in it ceased. Meaning if a battle occurred, the party would be down members. At the same time, her own characters never seemed to suffer the same problem. Sierra is seizing the reins and embracing her Dark Sierra arc. She has risen the ranks and is taking what's hers in a D&D group. But make no mistake, this is no game to her. This matters for some reason. She could have become an authoritarian dictator in another life, but no, she has a much more important task. She chose to rule an online gaming group, and the players of it will be made to suffer. People who think D&D is just for fun are the weak, and they are about to be culled. Thirdly, Sierra's party was so overpowered in comparison that running into them invariably led to combat that they had a decisive advantage in. Why negotiate with an enemy party when they are only a fraction of your strength and have nothing tangible to offer? 3 5th level characters do not equal 1 15th level character. Fourth, Sierra created the dungeons herself, stocked them herself, and was running a dmpc. The problem there was obvious. Lastly, there were cases where Sierra openly cheated. One example was when the Dice Emperor had obviously blessed me with several nat 20s in a row. Sierra actually accused me of cheating and demanded that I re-roll. I refused because I had been using the site's random number generator the whole time, and it had been Bravo himself who had installed it when he created the site in the first place. Bravo, out of character, Sierra, the numbers are purely random. He's just doing well tonight, it's fine. Sierra, out of character, no, he's doing too well. I want him to re-roll. Me, out of character, no, I refuse. If you're accusing me of cheating, then prove it. Show me evidence, because it would mean that I'm hacking the site and messing with the codes, which is something I have no idea how to do in the first place. So if you think I'm cheating, prove it. She dropped the issue. This time. However, things kept getting more and more difficult. In one of her dungeon crawls, the Sierra's party wound up getting 2 artifacts instead of 1. Her explanation? We had taken too long and another member of the Steel Fist succeeded in getting to it before us, because we had failed to meet a time limit that had never been divulged to us. Up to that point, she made it clear only 1 artifact could be acquired in each of her adventures, not multiple. In another of her adventures, we lost by default because I had been unable to join for a week, as I was away on a vacation and out of contact, and not enough people had joined in anyway. Therefore, the Steel Fist won by default because no one else wanted to play against them. Rules for thee, but not for me. As bad as this is, there is a good lesson for any writers listening in right now. Inconsistency is the quickest way to destroy your GMing and writing reputability. If you make a rule, absolutely do not break it unless under extreme circumstances. If you do, then you make your audience care less and less each time they realize the author can do whatever they want for plot reasons. She will continue to fail this lesson throughout, but it won't be the worst thing she does. After completing and losing the 6th dungeon, enthusiasm began to plummet. The only people who were enjoying themselves were the players of the Steel Fist, and that was because they were trampling over everyone else. And no one could effectively oppose them since, level-wise, they were double digits ahead of everybody else. Ouch. In other words, they were being a whole bunch of those guys and girls. Sierra was getting angry because no one was enjoying her campaign or her epic character. I was getting angry because we were running out of time and a lot of the other players did not understand what was at stake. Was this an am I the jerk moment for me? More than likely, and with good reason. By that time, I was feeling more and more like I was the last line of defense and that if I failed, then a lot more people would be quitting and leaving the site. It was around that time that a few new developments happened that returned some hope into RPG hell. First, Yankee joined forces against Sierra's group. He had been sitting on the fence for a while, observing, but had decided that she really had stacked things in her favor for far too long. Secondly, a few of Sierra's players out of character agreed with Yankee. They really were enjoying an unfair advantage, and Sierra was making the campaign far too serious. India removed herself from the Steel Fist, and Foxtrot, quote, exorcised himself of the entity, losing all of his gained levels and choosing to fight against Sierra instead. We were also allowed to run an additional adventure where we were able to successfully steal 2 of the artifacts from the Steel Fist. So by the end of that adventure, we had 3 artifacts in our possession. It was also at that time I completed a series of side adventures, all signed off on by Bravo, and tallied up the last of the gained experience. It had been risky, but I had succeeded in raising my character up to the same level as the people in Sierra's party. My character was now on equal terms with any one of them. In a one-on-one basis, the fight would be fair. Echo was impressed, Mike and Adam were nervous. Sierra, however, was angry. Just ignoring all of the negativity surrounding this story, does this not sound totally awesome to anyone else? A PvP faction war roleplay based on the collection and use of artifacts. Honestly, I want to run something like that. The biggest hurdle would be making a satisfying ending for the losing team, but the first person to crack that nut will be able to run one of the coolest concepts I've ever heard. Anyways, it's so funny. The painstaking ways DMs try to balance their games and make sure everyone's power is represented equally, just for this DM to say, no, nuh-uh, none of that, no balance, only me. Like, not only are you a no-skill railroading sack of garbage, but you also have main character syndrome? This is one of the worst DMs I've ever read about. Roll post. She apparently didn't like the idea of my character being the same level as hers. Finally, there had been an open confrontation against Sierra out of character. After the time limit loophole and the default win, people were pissed. I had openly accused her of giving her players unfair advantages that helped them win far more than they should have. Whiskey, Yankee, and several others backed me up. They all agreed that Sierra really did seem to be changing parameters and including hidden conditions that only favored her side. Sierra didn't like me accusing her of railroading, but Yankee backed me up on that one as well. She was setting all the details, and the time limit loophole had never been discussed with anyone. She had dropped that into everyone's laps after the fact when it was too late to do anything about it. In other words, we were all playing by rules that she had written, but had never shared a copy of. We rightfully felt like we were getting scammed. The ultimatum was given. The remaining adventures, and there weren't many at all, had to have all of their parameters and victory conditions discussed openly and agreed upon before the start. Otherwise, we would declare her campaign over, and any changes would be declared null. Her adventures were not role-playing. They were PvP competitions, with the stated outcome being potentially massive changes to our entire game world that we would all be forced to abide by. And more it was looking like she was desperate to implement it all, even if that meant ramming it down our collective throats. We were being put into a position, against our will, of having to either roll up entirely new characters under an entirely different set of rules, or become effectively obsolete in a new setting that we would have no say in. She assured us that was never her intent, but none of us really believed her, especially after she repeatedly tested positive for main character syndrome. There it is. DM versus player is a tried and true method of being a bad dungeon master. You are supposed to be a judge, a referee, a storyteller, not an active antagonistic force. The constant abuses are insane. How do you manage to fumble this bad? The only way I can see this getting any more cringe is if she, say, I don't know, tried to go full anime. But she would never do that. Oh no. No, Sierra, we don't care how much you love Bleach. You cannot introduce the Soul Hunters into our campaign. You cannot. You can't introduce monsters that can only be killed by weapons that your chosen ones can manifest. And you cannot become a cat girl version of Ichigo. We refuse to go along with this. The tyrannical Empress DM reigns from a throne of skulls. Her player servants are tearfully begging, "No, you can't insert anime into our game. Please, it will make us cringe." But she doesn't listen. She executes all of them and taxidermizes their rotting carcasses with anime body pillows. Or she ultimately complies, but she did not like it one bit. Once again, I had challenged her authority and won. It turned out later she had kept score of my, quote, disrespect towards her, and she intended to retaliate, and retaliate she did. But that's a different story altogether. Finally, the date for the last battle was set, and the parameters were fully discussed in advance. The remainder of the Steel Fist would be engaging in direct battle against everybody else. Even though her party was outnumbered by about 3-1, her party still had a distinct advantage because their levels, totaled up, was much higher than everyone else's. The Steel Fist consisted of several very high-level characters versus a large number of low to mid-level characters. Only a few characters, mine included, were anywhere near 15th level, and every character in Sierra's party could potentially one-shot anyone they hit. The stars were right. The countdown had begun, and experience points in massive amounts were going to be distributed among whoever was left. And the pool of experience points was in the millions. Welcome to the 7th layer of RPG hell, known as Thunderdome. The battle took over 2 hours from start to finish, and despite the level of imbalance, the Steel Fist won only by the slimmest of margins. The highlight of the battle had been a genuinely epic one-on-one battle between none other than Bravo and myself, with his character launching an all-out attack intended to take my character out as quickly as possible. He struck with absolute surety, completely confident that the mere mundane and his toys would not be able to resist or stand against the perfection of magic. rolls to attack were made. Hit. Damage would be extreme if it wasn't blocked. Roll to block. Success. With a speed and precision unlike anything he had ever seen or expected, Bravo was stunned into silence as his perfectly delivered attack was effortlessly deflected by the contemptible barbarian before him. He wielded a sword whose blade had withstood the impact of his own attack. For a brief moment, the sound of metal against metal canceled out all other noise, only to be replaced by the determined shout of that barbarian. A shout that was both a promise and a prayer. 3 words. The Emperor protects. Sierra, out of character. No, re-roll that. Me, out of character. Why? It was a verified roll. Sierra, I want you to re-roll that block. There is no way you could have blocked it. Me, out of character. Not this again. The random number generator is random. I have as much control over it as you do. And that melee round unfolded exactly as the rules dictate. Sierra, out of character. Reroll that last defense or you're banned. Bravo. Sierra, no, you're out of line. The result stands. From that moment forward, my character was battling non-stop and not able to assist anyone else. At first, it was only Bravo I was fighting. But then Mike and Sierra quickly joined in. Against 3-1 odds, I was worn down and defeated. I just hoped that I had bought everyone else a chance to win. Unfortunately, it was not enough. Everyone else, being much less powerful and not nearly as well equipped, were overwhelmed. Time ran out. The entity of the 7 was summoned. Sierra was thrilled. However, Bravo exercised his authority as DM Prime and changed the outcome. Because Sierra had only just barely won, the entity could not transform or rewrite the entire game world. In that part at least, we had won. However, the remaining Steel Fist members who had not been defeated, Sierra, Bravo, Adam, Echo, and Mike, they could keep the experience point reward as decided beforehand. Sierra was furious and tripled the amount, declaring that it was to, quote, compensate everyone for having to deal with OP's bullshit. Yes, she openly blamed me. Some of the others immediately protested. No one had made any complaints about my behavior, in character or otherwise. Whiskey even went so far as to accuse Sierra of doing it purely out of spite and dragging everyone else into her feud with me. Ultimately, Bravo used his authority as DM Prime to settle the matter. Sierra's decision would stand, and it was the start of him siding with Sierra more and more over time. India retained the massive XP boost both of her characters received, but began participating less. Mike gladly kept his boost, and while he scaled back the in-character antagonism slightly, he still played his character like he was Gaston from Beauty and the Beast. Adam rejected all of the experience points that he had been awarded, telling Sierra that her whole campaign had been a bunch of crap. Sierra, Bravo, and Lima naturally kept their XP awards, putting all 3 characters in an even greater lead over everyone else in the group. The rest of us soon got into the habit of interacting as little as possible with the Steel Fist characters, much to their extreme surprise. After everything they had done and how they had behaved, they were dumbfounded by our reluctance to trust them. If they had been merely possessed, that would have been one thing, but they embraced the changes and reveled in all of it, to the point of actively bullying and victimizing our characters. Them. It's just how our characters would have acted. Me, out of character, and this is how our characters would have reacted. Did you honestly think that other people's opinions of you would not change? Did it never cross your mind? Short answer, it didn't. They honestly believed that after everything that happened, we would all go back to being friends and everything would be water under the bridge. Oh, you don't get to do that. Simultaneously being the main character, Dungeon Master, and now free from consequences. This reads more like the DM wanted an audience to thrust her story onto, because apparently writing a book doesn't inflict enough pain onto other people. This is a disastrous example of a DM, and her boyfriend is absolutely guilty as well. I mean, props for not being the absolute worst, sure, but he should have stepped in much sooner and so much more. Anyways, let's wrap this up. Consequently, not only did a few more people drop out entirely, based, or at least just reduce their participation for a long time, it further divided our group into what became known as the two camps that were mutually at odds with each other. Sierra and I became the de facto representations of both. Sierra represented the serious, hardcore players who were out to win and get rewards. I represented the role players and story makers who were building and adding to the game world that we had all created over the course of 5+ years. Her next few adventures did indeed revolve almost exclusively around her ultra-powerful characters, but there was so little interest in participating in them that they largely faded into the background after several months. Gradually, the bad feelings created by the campaign of the Seven began to dissipate a little, but the damage had been done. At that point, I hated Sierra and automatically assumed that anything that she tried to do that involved me was to my detriment. Paranoid? Perhaps. But after all the times that she has tried to railroad and undermine my character, and after all of the cheating, I had no reason to trust her. This is a perfect representation of something that gets brought up a lot in the comments section, and something that I rarely talk about, but it's asking people why they don't just leave the bad game that they're in. If you're not having fun here, why don't you just pick up your ball and leave? While that's true in a lot of situations, it's not true in all, and it's certainly not true in a lot of the stories on this channel. Exactly like what was just described. If you spend 5+ years with one group, collectively building a world with lore and depth and history with your friends, it becomes incredibly difficult to just say, sorry, a couple of you suck right now, I'm just gonna abandon ship and leave. If the last 5+ years were pretty much okay, this could still just be considered a rough patch. I don't know how this story ends, but my guess is either the group is redeemed and it's good that OP didn't leave, or it's destroyed and a new one is created with the good people that are left. But it will all be revealed in time. Till then, if the next part is done, it will be in this box to the side. If not, give me a day or two. That said, we have 1, maybe 2 more videos left in this series depending on how we cut it. Till next time.